Citizens speak out. As people across the world continue to gather in protest for political and social reforms that offer greater human respect and regard for human rights, they march in countries such as Bahrain, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, Cuba, Egypt, Libya, Serbia, and Yemen.
Cuban leader Raul Castro oversaw the country's first Congress in 14 years to debate 311 reform proposals, announcing as one of the changes that political positions, including that of the president, would be limited to just 2 consecutive 5-year terms.
Serbians gathered in the tens of thousands Saturday, April 16th, to protest against poor economic performance and corruption, during which time Minority Party leader Tomislav Nikolic announced he was beginning a hunger strike until the nation's early elections are held.
An Egyptian court met another core demand of protesters by ordering the dissolution of former President Hosni Mubarak's National Democratic Party, which has dominated Egyptian politics since 1978.
In Cote d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, Pascal Affi-N'Guessan, leader of former President Laurent Gbagbo's Ivorian Popular Front Party and a former Prime Minister, called upon supporters to halt all fighting, saying it is time for citizens to unite and begin rebuilding. Meanwhile, supermarkets and street markets have been able to obtain supplies again to sell food to people in the capital of Abidjan. Meanwhile, Justice Minister Juno Ahuso announced that 70 of the 120 people detained at former President Laurent Gbagbo's compound, including working staff and family members, have been freed.
Bahrain State News Agency announced the government will not go ahead at this time with previous efforts to disband 2 of the country's minority parties whose members had participated in protests. Meanwhile, the US State Department has called upon the government to support freedom of expression and assembly. Press TV reported that 2 women have died in connection with the protests, including Azizeh Hassan, who died at her home when pro-government supporters raided houses in the Balad al-Qadim district on Saturday, and young teen Jawahir Abdul Amir Kuwaitan, who passed away after having been in a month-long coma due to attacks by pro-regime supporters.
In addition, the Bahraini government has detained human rights lawyer Mohammed Taher and at least 2 doctors on Friday night, with Human Rights Watch reporting that more than 8 other physicians were arrested in the past week. Over 4,000 people in Washington, D.C., USA, protested on Friday in solidarity with Bahrain, both in front of the Saudi embassy and the White House, calling for respect for human rights and support of the Bahrainis' demand for democracy.
On Friday, Burkina Faso's President Blaise Compaoré imposed a curfew in the capital Ouagadougou in response to a rebellion staged by the nation's army and the retaliatory actions of merchants. Military personnel had begun looting stores in apparent anger over unpaid housing allowances, with business owners who later stormed the National Assembly and set fire to the ruling party's headquarters in protest of the government's failure to stop the soldiers, with some saying that they had lost everything. In response, President Compaoré promised to pay the allowances and dissolved his existing government, while naming a new army chief and firing the head of his presidential guard. These events were preceded on Thursday by one of the largest demonstrations held in years, as tens of thousands of citizens protested the high cost of living.
US and European Union envoys to Yemen have submitted a proposal to President Ali Abdullah Saleh in an effort to solve the crisis in Yemen within 30 days. The proposal terms include the president naming a deputy to whom he will transfer presidential powers so that the appointed person can form a transitional government. It also states that President Saleh, his sons and nephews would then be able to leave the country without facing prosecution.
In Libya, government forces continued to fire indiscriminately on civilian populations in Misrata, with at least 5 people killed and 44 wounded on Saturday alone. The government has also been firing munitions on food production facilities in the city, as well as those entering healthcare clinics and hospitals. Revolutionary forces reached the outskirts of the oil center of Brega Saturday, bringing engineers with them to repair damaged infrastructure. However, by Sunday, government forces had taken advantage of poor visibility during a sandstorm to begin attacking Al-Shabiya from the south. Meanwhile, the France-based organization Doctors Without Borders announced it had managed to evacuate 100 people by sea to help them obtain medical treatment, and that they had arrived safely in Tunisia on Saturday.
A separate Greek ship carrying 1,200 migrants evacuated from Misrata arrived in Benghazi. Many had been waiting near the Misrata port for several weeks without food, water or shelter.
Russia today reports on a growing concern that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO bombs being used in Libya contain depleted uranium, with Dr. Doug Roke, a former director of the Pentagon's depleted uranium project, stating that the toxic metal has a half-life of 4.5 billion years, earning it the title of the silent killer that keeps on killing. Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, along with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and permanent NATO representative Dmitry Rogozin, have also been objecting to NATO's implementation of the Libya no-fly zone, emphasizing that it was originally intended as a humanitarian endeavor to halt the violence against innocent civilians, not to become a military operation of its own.
With sorrow for those who have perished, we are heartened by the glimmers of hope in countries where more harmonious change is occurring, and we pray for the end to all conflicts as citizens choose brotherly coexistence in dignity, freedom, and peace.